Thank you everyone for joining us. This will be a fun hour or so. We really want to take a step to really convey some of the basics of RFID, what it does well, what are its best practices, things like that. What are things that you have to take into consideration, and basically how it fits into the Flex infrastructure. So we've got a lot of things planned. We will be doing Q&A after we do the demo. And so put those questions into the comment area, and we will be storing those up for QA at the end of the round. So RFID. Before we get into RFID, I want to kind of talk about what we do as companies to track assets. And that's basically what the gist of this is. Back in the old days, before we had inventory software, people would have spreadsheets and they'd use maybe stencils to dictate what items are what, so they wouldn't have to look at serial numbers, but they're basically looking to identify assets with very specific identifiers. So in the old school, stencils were a great thing that people use. As we started getting into software, we wanted ways to quickly identify things without having to dictate that number. And so barcode scanning was a great way of aiming a laser or an image at a specific barcode. That graphical interface was then translated into a unique number screen that was translated to the software. It works great for line of sight. It's not so efficient when you're tracking thousands and thousands of items, but it's very reliable, incredibly reliable. Our customers scanned over 50 million items in and out of their warehouses last year. So new technology that has come around is RFID. And the basic functionality that you're looking when you compare the two is RFID is able to broadcast RF power, and the tags that are read will be batch captured and then sent to the software. So it's not a single line of sight barcode read. It is a multiple read simultaneously, and it's a batch capture. So what is RFID? The gist of RFID is there is a tag that's attached to an asset, and that tag can be scanned from a distance, and it's not required to have direct visual contact. And so it allows for faster capture of asset identifiers. And so the components of an RFID system are, you have the tag identifier, you've got the RFID reader that transmits power, that activates the chip embedded inside the tag. When that chip is activated, it sends out its identifier back to the reader, and then the reader's job is to send that data back to the system that it's communicating. So it's a three-step process: send power to activate the chip sends back identifier information to the reader sends that data to the software. So what I want to do is start off really quick and just show you a real quick example of how that works in the system. I've got Flex 5 Mobile up running on my desktop on the new Macs. And so as an example, I'm going to go and scan some of these items. We are doing a free scan in process. It's reading all those identifiers. Instead of grabbing and having to scan each one of those uniquely, it is simply reading those tags. This is saying how many unique tags it's read. Then we can review that process. And these are all the tags associated with inventory in this system that we are interacting with. And then we can scan that job back in, or those items back in. And the speed in Flex 5 is really efficient. And so that process would have taken us about, we estimate, a little bit more than 3 minutes if we're taking each one of those cables and scanning it. That was done in a matter of 6-7 seconds. So massive speed improvements in the functionality to work with obtaining those assets. So That's a quick little identifier and what we're going to be working with, and we'll go a lot more in depth. So there are different frequency ranges built for different purposes. Low frequency range is typically you'd see that used in chips. If you've got a pet that you've tagged, that tag is actually a low frequency RFID chip. The thing that works great is it's not in the frequency range that it's at. It can penetrate the skin easily. It's not a long distance read range. You got to be right on top of it, but it's got a very specific purpose and works very well. High frequency is another frequency range. Typically, this is in the range where the tap to pay or near field contact functionality, if you've got a little credit card size product that you go to enter your hotel room, that's using the high frequency range. Again, as I'm walking down that hallway, I'm not opening up every room or my room. I've literally got to tap it. It's got to be really close proximity that has specific designs for, I don't want, there's privacy and protection in that communication protocol, but high frequency range is typically the range for near field communication. So the final frequency range is what's called UHF, ultra high frequency. This is in a bandwidth that's very regulated throughout the world, meaning Wi-Fi and wireless microphones and things are in similar areas nearby and adjacent. And so because it's in that frequency range, governments have put very specific restrictions on where that frequency can work inside different countries. So as an example, Europe has a specific frequency range. US has a different one. Australia, they aren't on the same band. But the advantages of ultra high frequency allows us to capture things at a distance. We don't have to be right on top of it to read it, like a tap to pay, which is great for reading multiple tags simultaneously. So everything we do in Flex is in the ultra high frequency range. So the scanners and the tags will all be in that range. So one of the things to think about as you look at RFID is if you are a multinational location, how do you handle if one scanner in one country has to be on one range and another scanner in another country is in a different range? Ideally, you'd like one chip to respond to both, and there are very specific tags that can work in multiple frequencies, and it's basically the power is activated and it sends out in a range. So the tags are inert until the power is generated and received through the antenna. So in this instance, if you're in the US and your top scanner's on the US frequency, it would still receive the identifier back. Same thing with the UK. So there are very specific tags out there that can be used in multiple country jurisdictions with different scanners in that country. So there's been a lot of great improvements. Originally, we were recommending the RFD 8500 by Zebra. It was a great product and served a lot of good functionality. But the new updated Zebra scanners have really, really great improvements. I've got here the RFD 40. This is a great product. We recommend the RFID or RFD 40, the premium plus version. What that adds is the barcode scanner on the front. It can read 2D barcode scans. And so it's the product that we recommend in working with Flex, and we'll go over the reasons why. A little bit about the data and specifications. These have a really good drop rating. The 40 have a 5-foot drop rating. They can be tumbled over onto concrete. 500 times from a 1.6 foot range. And then these have a USB connector on the back for doing charging and also communication for setting up the profile. The 90, this has a larger drop range, 6 foot. Some people think it's not a lot, but in general, in warehouses, these things will get dropped and moved around. So that's what this adds, is a little bit higher drop rating. It is also more water impervious. As an example, it does not have a USB-C charger. It actually does all of its communication through this cradle on the back. And so that gives it better water tight specifications. All of these have removable batteries, which is really nice. Some people, instead of charging the whole device, will have multiple batteries on a multi-charger, and then they can just swap out. They don't have to sit there and wait for it to charge to reuse it. They can have spare batteries. The RFID 40 is a little bit more waterproof, so it has a more robust housing in there to do the battery charging, but that's great. They also improved the Bluetooth protocol to Bluetooth 5.3. Really techie stuff, but basically, if you're in Bluetooth HID mode, the speed transmitting via Bluetooth is improved over the 48, the RFD 8500. The other great thing that they've done with this is it has a dual trigger. It's a single trigger with different areas where you can pull the trigger. And we configure these so if the top pull is pulled, that is for an RFID scan. When the bottom trigger is pulled, that is a barcode scan. And this allows you to work with barcode scanning cases and then RFID what's inside of them. And it's very efficient. On the previous 8500, you used to have to hold a button here for 3 seconds to change the mode. This is a much faster interface. There are also lots of different attaching devices for on top. They come with just a flat panel. If you're connecting it to a desktop or to a tablet, you'll leave the flat panel on. There are panels that will just allow for a unique case made by OtterBox that this will bolt on top, and then that just slides in place and allows for a Bluetooth connection. And so I've got that set up on the 90. And then Zebra is also making some new devices. They've got a Zebra TC21. This one has a USB connector on the back. And so it's got a very specific sled that will allow that USB connector to connect directly to the scanner. And this sled allows you to simply drop in the front and push in the back to connect it. So there's different sled capabilities for this. So it's a much more modular product. So tag examples, there's been some great improvements in tag infrastructure and functionality. One of the greatest tags for our AV industry is a company called Vizinex originally created them. They were bought out during COVID by HID, a global RFID company. They're a great company. They've done really well with these, but they make these in very different sizes, all the way down from XLR cable, Cat5 cable, all the way up to feeder cable and things like that. So the concept on these tags is you've got different shells. So this is a top shell casing that has a clear cutout, and you can put a plastic insert over there. This is the tag that gets inserted into this. And you can get those printed with your logo and a barcode on there. And then there is a back housing. And you can also get some inserts if the cable is a little bit smaller. It can fill in the gaps for that. And then you can also put a space for cable tie to go through. So when you've got all your cable with cable tie to tie it up when it's not in use, it'll keep that instead of having to wrap that with electrical tape or things like that. And so again, this goes down to very small tags to very large tags. It's a really robust housing. In the beginning, there were some manufacturers that were creating labels that had a barcode and RFID on top of it and then wrapped around. We've just found that over time, those get the antennas get broken and the RFID doesn't work. So one of the greatest things that they've got for the AV industry is this type of a tag. There's also different label types. Typically labels and RFID in general are designed, and you'll look at the specs and they'll say these are meant to be put on metal or these can be used on or off metal. And this typically they will have a slightly longer read range if they're on metal or not, depending if they are if they use both. But great usage for these, putting them on speakers, lights, truss, anything with a solid surface. And they make them in varying sizes, different manufacturers. LinTag, this is a great product made by HID Global. When you look at this tag, you'll see kind of a little arc in the middle. That is the actual antenna, and then there's a square IC chip in it. These are flexible and they're washable, and so they're great for attaching to drapes, tablecloths, costumes, things like that. And they have specific lin tags for different attachment styles. Some have a little area where you can screw it in, and another area to iron it on or to enclose it in a pouch where you just sew it in. There is other types of tags out there. One of them that I found that's been very useful is the S dot made by Xerify. This is a great tag. Here's an example of a headset microphone. We have heat shrunk that small tag directly onto the cable. So it'd be very hard to put any kind of a label or the Vizinex cable clamps on this. And so it's not a huge long range device. This is actually meant to be put on metal, but for nearby proximity scanning, it works really well. What about items that you really can't put RFID onto them? So in this example, on a handheld microphone, I really can't put a label on here. I don't want to put a housing. I don't want to put it inside the grill because that'll affect the audio quality. If I try to put it inside the housing, it's not going to get good read range because large metal things create for very inferior scanning read rates. And so the best thing that we've come up for something like this is we have found a vendor that creates these micro dots. They're about a third of an inch in diameter, and they've got a 2D barcode on those. And so as an example, I can just scan that through here. So there are things that just do not lend themselves great for RFID, but we've got some great options for that. So in the picture, that's the little label with the micro dot 2D barcode in there. Other improvements, there have, of course, everyone knows of the supply chain issues during COVID. These have been resolved for the vast amount of things in the RFID industry. I just placed a new order for 3 new scanners. We sold the last ones we had, and they shipped out the same day from our supplier Zebra. There was consolidation of vendors. HID Global acquired Vizinex, which was a great thing. The greatest thing about that acquisition is for the first time, there is a audiovisual sales specialist that I found in an RFID company. And so there is a specific person there, Lisa Moore. That's her phone number. That's her email. She is incredibly easy to work with and readily available. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it really is. I'd go to RFID trade shows and I'd try to talk to companies about the things that we're trying to track, and they just had this, glazed look, and I'd point up and say, see that truss, see that light, see these things, that's what we're tracking. They just kind of look at me and okay, but really didn't have any desire to really get into our industry. So they're a great company and a great contact. And again, they have good supply chain um, results.
Hey, Chris, can I squeeze in one question here?
Yeah, of
We've had a
course.
few people ask just about different types of scanners. We've been talking about handheld. It seems there's some interest in like, are there door-mounted scanners, or what other options might exist?
Yeah, we'll get into that soon. I am not a great proponent for portals. Again, you've got to look at what things were designed and they were designed for. A lot of the RFID portals, they weren't meant for the RFID or for the AV industry. There's ways you can make it work. There's a lot of upsides to portals, but there's a lot of downsides. And we'll go into that a
Right.
little bit more later on. But right now, we feel the balance of speed and auditability and accuracy are paramount, and that's why we've kept it in the handheld device area so far. Another interesting improvement with the new silicone chips in Apple laptops and desktops, you can actually run our mobile product meant uh, for tablets and phones in the laptop or desktop environment. So about this Mac, this has the M3 chip. And so with that, we are actually able to, from the App Store, go and search for Flex 5, and it'll find it under iPhone apps. And so we can download that app. So I'm actually going to be doing the demo quite a bit in the Flex 5 app and just running it on my desktop. So a nice little improvement. So considerations with RFID. So one of the benefits that we talked about with RFID, it doesn't require line of sight. When you saw me go over and do the pre-scan in that area, it read all those tags nearby. It is typically a directional scan, and its proximity. There is amplification settings for these. So the higher the amplification, the further it goes. And so that's an advantage and a disadvantage. If I'm working in a small environment and I crank up my antenna gain, a lot of times I'm going to get tags that are around my area. So in a lot of warehouses that I've worked in, there are very small aisles to work inside. So working with the right amplification of these is really important. Also, then there's the problem of scanning stuff when things are scanned on top of each other or laid on top of each other or inside cases. UHF is not great for penetrating cases. It can be done, but again, a lot of times you're going to amplify that. Anytime you amplify the gain to penetrate, you might get unwanted tag reads elsewhere. So everything's a balance in finding those things. And so I always talk about its strengths are also its weaknesses. It's not line of sight, which is great for gathering lots of tags. It's not line of sight, which can lead to unintended reads. So those are just sort of considerations that you need to be aware of as you start to work with RFID and in the real world. One of the most important things that I really like to hit home is the goal is not to get to bad data fast. RFID, you can capture data so quick without a review process, if you just scan and go, and especially RFID portals, with the wrong person inadvertently walking by the wrong portal, someone could have just scanned out a whole case, and by going the wrong route to go to the truck, all of a sudden you scanned all that stuff in, and oh, by the way, you won't know that you just added availability stuff because it thinks that all that gear came back and it hasn't even gone on the truck to go to the show. And so those are the things that we really need to be very aware of. Is data is fast, but that doesn't mean you just do things without any review and get the right data in. So that's one of the worst things about RFID, is how quickly it can ruin stuff. We all know how hard it is to keep availability going in general, but even add the wrong types of scans. I could get 100 items going back in when I just prepped them, and now I got to rebuild it and do all sorts of stuff. So bad data fast is not the goal. So RFID in the product, I want to give you a quick example here. I'm going to take as an example this microphone. I'm going to scan the barcode here. Oops, I was working today. There we go. In the backend, in the database, this number, that's the unique identifier in the database. All we are doing is using different fields to identify those in different ways. And so in this example, we've always used a barcode to identify that long string, but now we have a 24 character number that is embedded into these RFID tags. And so it's just a new identification tool. So when RFID is in there, you will have a barcode and a RFID field that you will fill in. So the thing that I really enjoy and am very proud of in the way we've implemented RFID is we have a very well-established best practices. When you get into the circular nature of rental and AV industry warehousing, I always start at the return is the start. We will return stuff back into the warehouse. You put together a robust QA process to make sure everything's working before it goes out again. Before it goes on the shelf, we build containers and make items show ready so that the prep is as efficient as possible. And whether you're using barcode scanning, RFID, or both, the workflow doesn't change at all. And so, like I said before, we've got a very well-proven backend, 50 million scans last year. We had a quarter of a second average processing response time from scan to that ding that you will hear, the response. And so we built a very robust backend and a front end that we can handle this, and everything in the workflow continues the same, whether you're using RFID or barcode scanning. So what we mean by that is, as we are starting our return down here in the left hand, we can return things through either free scan in or going to the manifest return. What happens with RFID is a lot of times you will be taking a lot of your items that were non-serialized, maybe your cable, and turning them into serialized items, but you get the speed of the batch capture that will not make that return and prep process as lengthy if they were barcoded. So we can return via free scan in or manifest with barcode or RFID. Then we get to the point where we start to build our cases so that the prep is going to be faster. So if I've got a case with 2 speakers in it, we can scan the case RFID the contents, and close the case. And so the filling of the many items inside that can be sped up through RFID reads. The prep happens the same way. And so if we've got storage containers, we're just going to scan the case out. We don't even have to worry about the contents because they were built ahead of time. We can handle free pick containers, and we can handle loose items, again, with barcode scanning and RFID. If you're using an optional ship scan, we have functionality where people will normally just mark it as shipped. We also have the ability to do a secondary scan in that as part of that ship scan process. And typically in that functionality, it's configured that you just scan the cases as they go on the truck, and it marks the case and the contents is checked, and then all of what we call our loose items, your non-cased items. So that whole functionality works with barcode scanning and RFID very seamlessly. So let's do a demo here, and I'm going to go into a job that I created. And so here's our pull sheet, and we've got some audio items, some lighting cables, some video, some truss, some drape, a good amount of gear here. So we're going to go into do all this in our mobile product, and we started with free scanning everything in from the last job. So that's our step number one. Before we put things back on the shelf, we're going to go into content builder mode. So I've got some cute little Pelican cases here. They've got some RFID tags and labels in them that I'm going to be interacting with. And we get the question, should we RFID our cases? And the reasons why we don't RFID cases is there's a lot of times when we need to trigger a very specific call based on that barcode. So in this instance, in storage container mode, when I scan this case, we have the storage requirements for this, that it needs 8 LED tiles. Without that, we can't trigger this page when we just scan everything. It needs to know what it is before we fill it. So now that we're in here, we go to RFID, and it just read the 8 labels in here. This review process that I said is very important. Right now, we've scanned these 8 items, and if this is the right 8 items, if I've got power cable or stuff that wasn't supposed to be in here as an example, I could uncheck that, but that's what we expected. And so we can scan that, and now that case is closed. And so if we were doing, 20 of those cases, I'd close this scan, grab the next case, scan the case, fill it with RFID, scan the case. So it's a very fast process. So right now, if we go back to this process, we started with the return through free scan in, and we've done storage container and everything show ready. So our next step is let's prep things. So in the prep, and I've got this mobile product configured. So here's all the jobs that are going out today. Right now, we don't have any manifests that are returning. So I can click on this job and go to the prep screen, and these are all the items. It looks a mobile format of what the desktop looks like, but here's all the things that we need in audio, lighting, video, etc. So we did our prep scan of scanning the case and putting the contents in there. So now when this job goes out, I just have to scan the case, and that is done. If I've got 40 cases of LED tiles, you can't go any faster than just scanning 40 items. And now we've got, 560 tiles or something. So that's a great process. So the next thing that we've got is different free pick containers. A lot of times I'm not sending all this cable loose. I'm putting it in cases. I don't know what case I'm going to use until I'm packing it. So we have these empty cases that we store in our warehouse that we call free pick containers. So free pick container is while we're prepping, I'm going to open up a case and then I'm going to fill it. So now with RFID, I'm reading these tags. I was actually expecting 21. This is an example of I read a tag that was a couple feet away from me. And so I can say, nope, I don't want to put that in this case. But that's why that review process is really important. I get fast data. I don't want to get bad data. So we're filling those 21 items into that case after that review process. And I can scan the case to close it up. And then we can start to go rather quickly. I'm going to scan the case, go into RFID mode. I was expecting 16. I got the right 16. I'm going to close and close the case. I got 2 more cases. Scan the case. Fill with RFID. I was expecting 16. It was all XLR cable. You see the speed at which everything is going. And we can also just tap to close. Last case that we're going to fill. RFID. This has some electrical cable, lots of the Vizinex RFID stuff. And then I've got some truss. I've got a bunch of tags just in this area, but I'm going to put the truss, in theory, I would call that loose items. Oops. I got 1 extra tag that I wasn't expecting. Oh, wait, no. I've got 5 instead of 4. Scan all 5. And we'll close that up. Okay, so when we look at this, we can look at the manifest, and the manifest has all the cases, what's inside each case. There's our extra truss. That's what we added. And then we can also, if we want, capture a signature from someone from this area. So one of the things that's really important about what we've done here, oh, and I'm just going to, let's just hit finalize on this from, and now we're going to mark this as prepped. Okay. I'm going to open up the manifest in the desktop product, and you'll see everything that we've got here. If we double click or single click here, we can collapse things. And one of the new reports that's coming out, we've always had a value manifest. We've been working with a couple different customers who are asking for a little bit more robust manifest, especially for carnets. So in this example, what we're showing here is this is the case. That's the dimensions of the case. Here's the cost of the case itself and the weight. Here's the replacement cost of everything that's inside of it. So a subtotal cost of $26,800, and the weight of the case 194.4. And so we've got all of that broken out for each case. And then we've got our loose items. Now inside or in the header area, we've got a total value of this job. We've got a total weight. We've got volume if you want to start to calculate volume that you'll need for a truck. We've got 5 total containers in this job. We've got 5 loose items. These were the trusses that aren't in a case, so a total piece count of 10. And so this is really important to kind of go over is we were able to get to this using barcode scanning and RFID. We were able to get all these items very efficiently built. We could have done this just through a flat scan of just scan everything, and that works well for some people. It would have been even faster not having to open and close cases. But for a lot of people, getting to this sort of report is paramount for them. And so this is why we put this process together, and it works again, whether you're using barcode scanning or barcode scanning and RFID, we get to the right end product. So that whole process, we would go from there and return it when it comes back, things like that. But this whole process is cyclical in nature and is very repeatable, and we can add efficiency in RFID in all the places. So some of the competitors comparison, this information came from a customer feedback who had left Intelligent, but they were using a third-party portal in their system, data pushed through the system through a third-party application. That data came into there about 3 to 5 minutes later, which is not good. Half the times, if it comes that late, you're not going to review it or review it all the time. And they even said it crashed half the time, and some of the data that you returned didn't show up as returned. So it was just a very clunky system that created more problems than it solved. And I don't know if they've improved it since then, but that was the feedback that we got from a customer who came from their product. Rentman is another competitor. The way they put their system together is they have to use barcode scanning for prep. I don't know why, but to me, you're losing half the value of prep for all those items that we've got on the items, 70 items. We're able to grab all those 70 items with RFID instead of scanning. Then they add a ship scan process where they're using RFID to compare the list of what was built on the prep scan. And the hard part of that is everything's cased up, everything's stacked on top of everything. And so we get lots of feedback that the list that they captured through RFID is incomplete because of interference. And so they're comparing an incomplete list of gear to a complete list of gear, and it'll never work out well. And then they do return via RFID, which is great. So in our system, again, we can prep via barcode scans. We can ship. When people do ship scans, we recommend that they just scan the cases and the loose items. It's much more efficient, and you don't have to worry about that. And then return via scan and RFID. So that's, again, our process doesn't change whether you're using barcode scanning or RFID. And we haven't heard of many people getting great overall workflow functionality out of that product. So other areas that we're looking to improve on, when we were doing the review of stuff, we were showing each serialized item. We are going to be improving that in the mobile app by adding a consolidated line with how many quantities. It'll be easier to review those and have 4 line items with multiple quantities for each line item instead of having to count that up. We're going to be working with really reducing some of the overall touches. We're also going to be increasing the scan read rate. Right now, we have that capped at 100. We are in the process of reviewing that and making sure how high we could go. But a lot of times, where that 100 cap came from was the mobile product was the first thing we did in the Flex 5 environment and architecture. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to blow things up with sending that sheer amount of data that quickly. And so we're getting great results, and we will be adding that functionality in the future, and just other overall mobile improvements. We look to be taking that capture functionality into the desktop in the future, and even allowing RFID into scheduled counts in the future. As far as portals, that is the lower priority of everything. I don't think we will get to that anytime soon. If we do implement it, we might do some area where we will allow it for a return area that's very isolated, to make sure that you're not walking by this area and returning stuff on your way to the truck to ship it, things like that. But it is something we are considering. But right now we're getting great results with the mobile product, and we're prioritizing mobile and desktop. New improvements. Like I said, the TC21 is a great product. We have a customer who has started implementing these in their workflow. And the difference is the speed. Currently, when we've been connecting to the desktop and with mobile products, we're connecting Bluetooth via this to the device. With this USB connection, we are transmitting data captured from here to the device through that 8-pin connector right there. And so what this allows us to do is to get that data much quicker. Let's see, I just turned this one on, and I'm going to make sure it's ready to go. So we've got 0 on here. Oops. Always takes, let me pop that off. Let me reseat it. Still getting used to this. I just had it configured. Not working now. But basically the ID tags are read instantaneous. Let's see. For some reason it was working before. But I've got a video that we'll send along where it basically shows less than a second to get 70 tags into the data. So that's one of the great new things, is using the mobile device with the USB connection. Let's see. The other thing that we want to go over is we have what we call an RFID proof of concept package. The RFID subscription add-on is an additional $100 per month. The scanner, we allow these to be either purchased or rented. So we've got most of our customers are purchasing these, and purchasing many of them. Other ones are just renting them and just taking a lower upfront cost to make sure it's right for them. So we allow that. We buy these, get them configured to work directly with your system, so there's no other configuration needed on your end. We also have what we call a tag package, where we send 10 each of the following 2 different sizes of the cable, one for XLR and Cat5 cable, another one for AC cables, different labels from Metalcraft, Zerify labels, that dot label, and the HID lin tag. So you get 10 of those, and it allows you to start to put them on items and do some testing. And so those are available to go out.
Maybe one thing I can add quickly there, Chris.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think for the team here, we are working on a quick ROI calculator we can use. Chris mentioned some of that time savings, so we know kind of investments need to be kind of driving the business forward and providing a return. And I think the initial analysis based on some kind of average customers is that we have with about you'll be looking at about a kind of $10,000 a year return. Kind of an initial investment will kind of pay itself off in about 7 to 8 months. So we'll have more on that in the next week or so, but something we can share with everybody so you can get an idea of kind of what you might be able to realize kind of by enabling some of these capabilities.
Yeah. And I'm all for the savings, and it is a real savings, but to me, the proof is in how it works and how well it fits into your workflow process. And we feel that we have a process that we're not selling something that's just going to fall apart, and the hope doesn't come to a reality. Oh wait, got this. Okay, so I was doing some configuration. So I'm on here. I go to free scan in. And so it grabbed all those tags that quickly. So it's a much faster process through the USB. Let me do a more of a sweep. And so we got 100 tags in a second. So that's something that we're still making sure we've got the right configurations and understand all the settings to make sure that we will support that, but it's looking really promising. So we've got about 60 customers using RFID currently. Everyone's in different stages of the implementation process. One of our great customers that I've been working really closely with, they've done a really interesting implementation process. And their decision was, we don't use all of our cable is non-serialized. We want to start with just serializing all of our cables and putting tags on each of them. They've completed that process. They've decided for now to put barcode scanning on the out and RFID on the return just to see how things are working. And they're getting incredible results. And it's a really good incremental process. Every so often we get people who want to go hog wild, and it's like, let's get the basics down and let's make sure it's working. And this was just a really interesting process that they've done. So example, when they are returning jobs specifically, they're not going by the free scan in, but they'll go and grab the cases and they'll take it out and count. Okay, here's 50 of this size of cable, return it, make sure it's good, boom. And so they're doing that stuff. It's really good, thorough process, and they're getting excellent results. It's time for QA. So Jason, you've got the queue. I'm sure it's high, but let me know what I can give more detail on.
Yeah, I think there was just a bunch of questions kind of around, how we can use RFID today. Can it be used in the web app from the browser on a PC as an example? There was also a question around like for Mac, is the app better than the browser? Do we recommend one over the other?
So the thing to look at is the RFID is a batch capture process. And what we've done with the batch capture is it is this icon that allows us to capture that, review it, and scan it. And so as an example, this RFID process is only built in the mobile app as of yet. We are currently doing some programming where we've added this in a trial project, embedded this screen into the desktop product. So in the future, when we go to scanning, our goal is to have an icon here that will allow us to connect Bluetooth to the desktop product, receive, review, and then scan. So RFID in warehouse processing currently is only in the mobile app. As far as updating data, as an example, if I were in the desktop product and I wanted to add an RFID label to an existing barcoded asset, I could like read this tag, Oh, scan the wrong one. So, oh, oops, sorry. Okay, try it one last time. So I'm going to scan this item. And if I were to update this, I'd uncheck the enter key and then read that RFID tag and update that information. So I can update in both desktop and mobile. If I were to do that same process in the mobile app, I would typically be using what I call the inquiry scan. This doesn't scan anything in or out, but I would scan the barcode and then I would open that serial unit. Oh, wait, no, I want to edit the serial unit. I would click in there and then read that one tag and then hit save. So we can update RFID info in both mobile and desktop. Warehousing processes are only available in the mobile app as of now.
Great. There's a couple of questions just around kind of initial setup and implementation. I think kind of along the lines of how long does it take to set up, a single item from scratch or things along those lines as far as kind of getting the items tagged and set up in the system.
Um, there is a labor portion of it of like the cable clamps, attaching them to the cable and then entering that RFID information. One of our customers, they were migrating from a serialized asset or a non-serialized cable asset to a serialized. They bought all of their tags specifically already pre-printed with the barcode and RFID. And then I believe they did an import and they had very specific ranges that they allocated for specific inventory models and stuff like that. So that helped them put that in place a little bit faster because they imported that data. But you can also, sometimes you already have the barcode on there and I'm just going to add the RFID stuff. So, 30 seconds to update, scan it, edit it, update it, save it, scan the next item. So 30 seconds per tag, but there's also, affixing it. It's easier to put a label on than to put a cable housing on.
Okay. Let's see. What else do we have here? Yeah, I think the question about inventory counts, I think you spoke to that and planned improvements. There was also some questions around kind of the batch count of 100. I don't know if you've got anything more to add there around, kind of those items, but I think we covered them off.
The limit was implemented early on as a protective measure to make sure we weren't going to just blast the database and overload it. We are actually in the process of playing with 500 count limit in the desktop and putting a kind of queue behind it. So it's not just blasting 500 items. It's sending them on a, 10 1 second, 10 another second, and sending stuff like that. So we're trying to find the best way to make sure that we got speed and stability.
All right. Well, why don't we squeeze one more in? We're at time. We'll try and get the rest of these answered in the next week or so. But just a few questions around kind of how the scanning works, right? So there's a question around: do they all need to be in the same case? There's people that have cases full of cables and they're not getting them all successfully scanned. They're wondering if these new tags, the business tags, may help improve those rates. There's a question about if a cable comes back broken and it's scanned, kind of how we would kind of manage that. So we can have that as our last question and kind of wrap up from there.
Yeah, a lot of what I talked about with cables, a couple little details on things. So as an example, tags are not omnidirectional as far as their their broadcast range. As an example, if I am directly on top of this scanner and am perpendicular to it, I get a better read range than if I'm on a weird axis. So that's one of the things to take in consideration. That's just the polarization of the tag that's in there. So as an example, when you've got a toll pass on your car, the reason they have you put it right there and the antennas up at the same thing is they want to get the best read rates. That's an example of why they set it up that way. What that means is cable, filling a whole trunk of cable and then trying to scan it. One of the things that you get there is I've got also interference of every cable on top of the other cable adds a little bit more attenuation. And if I've got 200 cables in there, that's hard to review and you're more likely to get some missing stuff. So to me, a lot of times breaking these up into smaller processes that allow for more accurate count. So if I had a cable rack on my right-hand side and a trunk right here, I'm going to count. I'm going to look at the page or the screen and say, I need 50 of these. I'm going to count 50. I might lay them out on the floor and then scan all 50, make sure I got the right 50, mark it good, and then put those in the case. And then I'm going to go grab 25 of these. It's really easy to make sure you're getting the right data and accuracy and accountability. The other thing that I love about everything that we do is we put a user ID behind every scan. So all these scans get a user ID. If you start to see all these issues with a user, you will see that data in the scan logs and be able to track that down and get better training involved. So ideally, even if we increase the scan limit on a prep, I'd still be very cognizant of trying to break things up and do it in small increments instead of grabbing, 10 different types of cable with different quantities, packing them on top of each other and expecting perfect scan. I'm just a realist. Like, I don't think you're going to get as complete a results as you expect. And so finding a workflow that you get the accuracy is really important for me.
Awesome. Well, why don't we leave it there? Thank you, everyone, for your time today. Hopefully you found this valuable, and we will get the recording out later today, tomorrow at the latest, and do some follow-up around the questions we weren't able to get to in the next week. So thanks again for your time, and have a good rest of the week.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Contact sales at flexrentalsolutions.com. They can get your proposal for a tag package, whether you want to rent or buy, and get you moving on that and get the benefits. Thank you very much.